Your program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I'm your host, Sara Higdon. This is Transform to Freedom. Hope y'all are having a good week. Obviously, it's been a little bit rough here. The hurricane moved through last week. If y'all know, I'm in Atlanta, and I will say we got quite lucky than what other people in the state did. Now, it was really interesting. We got a lot of rain, but it hit here about 6 a.m. What was that on Friday? Yeah, 6 a.m. on Friday, I think. Yeah, it was Friday. And I heard it. I heard it a little bit. I heard some of the wind, but it was raining a lot. We had some flooding. Yeah, quite a bit of flooding. Not by my house. But the thing about Atlanta that most people don't know, like, it can rain for like 10 minutes and it floods. So Atlanta is prone to flooding, but what's not usual is that like the Chattahoochee River runs right through, or it runs north of Atlanta and then moves out. But it raised some of the highest levels. I think what I heard. So I heard that the news was reporting that the previous high for the Chattahoochee River was 27 feet, which is extremely high for a river, if you know. Apparently, they said that it broke that record high and was at about 32 feet. So there's a lot of flooding. Some of the the parks by me were flooded. But what people don't realize, I didn't even realize this until I moved to Atlanta. Atlanta's quite hilly as well, so there's a lot of ups and downs, and so the top of the hills really didn't see much, and the bottom of the hills did. But it was really interesting because I know right at about Atlanta is where the hurricane started doing that eastern movement towards towards Nashville. And so it was spinning on a counterclockwise. It was spinning counterclockwise, and so the bottom rain band sat over Atlanta for like 2 hours, I think they said, while the rest of the storm kind of turned. Like Atlanta was like the base axis, so it was like Atlanta's here and it like hooked around. But like I said, we didn't have nearly the damage that I've seen in other places. So obviously we're looking at Asheville, North Carolina, a bunch of places in North Carolina. You think North Carolina, like Asheville, is well above sea level. But the problem is it's above sea level, so all the water will move out. But when you get into these little drainage areas, so you get in these peaks and valleys, the valleys will flood. 1 second. So the valleys will generally flood, and so then but then so it's going to take a little bit for them to move out, and it was just a complete disaster up there as well. And which I'm going to talk about that here in actually, let's just talk about it now. So you guys know I did the event with Andrew and Blair White last week, right? And Andrew lives on the east side of the state. So it was really interesting because it seemed like everything on the east side of the storm, the right side of the storm, is where a lot of the wind was hitting. it was interesting because Andrew messaged me the night before just to make sure I was good and that I was gonna be okay. Like asking me if I was worried or anything like that. I'm like, no, I'll be good, and telling me to be safe. And that turns out where he lives in Augusta got it a lot worse than we did in Atlanta, and it got really bad. And so if you saw, I posted this, and I want y'all to, if you can, you know what I'm gonna do? Actually, after this stream is over, go check out GoFundMe, because Andrew's house was like totaled, and they don't have power, and so they moved out. But basically, their entire city of almost 200,000 people is without power. They moved out of there and they're staying in a hotel. So anything you can do, go and support Andrew's GoFundMe. I think he's got it on his platforms, but if not, I forgot to post it. Actually, let me do this. I think I can post it in here. Paste. Yes. Okay. What's that? That's weird. So I think you can just click that link and go help out. I don't know what his homeowner's insurance is going to be able to do for him, but either way, it's somebody that y'all know, who a lot of people rely on in that area, and it broke my heart when he texted me and the pictures of the damage, and he's posted pictures on his Instagram account of other trees down. It's not just flood insurance, but it's not just flood insurance. It's like a tree through the roof. It's hurricane damage, which in Augusta, in this far north, in these types of areas, you're not expecting hurricanes like if you lived in Florida and everything like that. So it's just it's absolutely heartbreaking. And we'll talk about, more than 1,000 people missing in North Carolina County, devastated by the hurricane. So this is what's really interesting, because we hear about Florida getting hit all the time. The southern states, the coastal states, they're used to dealing with hurricanes, and so they're used to dealing with responses, and a lot of their infrastructure is set up to clear out water quickly and deal with responses in this way. Obviously, we have major tragedies that do happen, like a few years ago, what we saw happen in Fort Myers. The entire beach line that I had gone to before were completely wiped out. We see that happen even in Florida and places, because there's just some things you can't do when you're living by the beach areas. But North Carolina, especially the mountains in North Carolina, you think you're so far away from the coast, you live in the mountains. You never really expect like a scene like this to happen up there. And yet here we are. And it's like, we always talk about, like, the people in Florida, when the hurricane's about to land in their vicinity, they evacuate, right? Well, there was no way. Why would somebody in Asheville, North Carolina, evacuate? Because you would think, oh, it's just gonna be it may be a little bit of rain. It's gonna be a tropical storm. It's not even gonna be that bad when it gets up here. It's not. Maybe it's gonna be even downgraded before a tropical storm. You're just not expecting it to be that bad when you live so far inland and up the coast, and have never dealt with hurricane situations in the past. And so unfortunately, Asheville got hit or just about harder than anybody, it seems like. You would think, yeah, work exactly. Jen McMahon says it's like you're as high as you can go being in the mountains. How much further do you evacuate to? Exactly. You expect that this would be one of the safest places in terms of a hurricane. Like people from Florida would evacuate to somewhere like Asheville. A lot of times when a lot of these hurricanes, I actually see people all the time. When we get hurricanes coming in, I'm always, you go out to a restaurant and something, in Atlanta, and you talk to people and they're like, yeah, I'm evacuated from the hurricane. And so a lot of times they come just up to Atlanta, but this year they couldn't do that for this one. It's like they had to, like, there was like no good safe place to go. Cause I mean, they got hit in East Georgia, got hit really hard. You're talking East Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. It hit hard in places that you would never really expect that this would happen. Yeah, Paige says she's from Augusta but lives in metropolitan Atlanta and only got rain, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday got sunshine. I was shocked when I talked to my mom and told me about Augusta. Yeah, I mean, that was me too. Obviously, I live right in Atlanta. I don't live downtown, but it was crazy because it was such a nice weekend here in Atlanta. The storm hit on Friday. And then, like, immediately after the storm hit, like, we're talking, like I said, it hit around 6 a.m. Like, immediately after that happened, by 11 a.m., we had sunshine, and it ended up, I mean, it brought in the cool weather, but we had, like, 75-degree temperatures all weekend. It was a really nice weekend here in Atlanta, and it's just crazy how fast it came in and how fast it went out, at least here. But then you hear about, like, what happened after it left us. It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, our city floods all the time, but we don't usually receive that much rain. So that's why I was kind of worried about what was going to happen. But this is one of the things that I kind of want to talk about too, is what the president of the United States said right here. Okay. And when asked by a reporter, said, will there be any additional resources given to areas pummeled by the hurricane? So this is what let's listen to this.
Yes, it's tragic. As a matter of fact, we're trying to get the exact number. My FEMA advisor is on the ground in Florida right now. There's a distinction between the numbers that FEMA's used and the ones that are used by the locals. So it really is amazing. You saw the photographs. It's stunning.
It's unbelievable.
It really is.
Such a wide area.
And we've given them all everything that we have. We're on the ground ahead of time, so we're working hard.
Are there any more resources the federal government could be giving them?
No, we've given them. We have pre-planned a significant amount of it, even though they didn't ask for it yet. Hadn't asked for it yet.
Do you have any words for the victims of this hurricane?
Let me go back and actually re-listen to this end part real quick.
Ground ahead of time, so we're working hard.
Are there any more resources the federal government could be giving them?
No, we've given them.
So that's the thing. Basically, he's saying there's no more resources for the federal government to give. Now, that's a little bit. They are doing everything that they've can right now. She asked if there would be any additional if there were any additional resources the federal government could be giving them. He said no, which I don't necessarily buy that. I mean, what do you mean no? I mean, you have You have military on the other side of the state. You have military in Fayetteville with the 82nd that should be up there, probably helping. North Carolina National Guard. It's a state asset, but they should be up there helping. But using military assets to help in the recovery is what they should be doing, not just relying on FEMA and other organizations, right? I saw a meme, and it reminds you of, you know, the Hurricane Katrina, the George Bush, the Kanye West, George Bush doesn't care about black people comment, and the meme was Joe Biden doesn't care about white people, which is interesting. But so Asheville is a very progressive city. It's the notion behind Asheville is keep Asheville weird. I love Asheville though, even though it's more of a progressive hippie town, which it's fun, but in the middle of the mountains. So it's interesting. I've been there quite a few times. I have a friend that lives a little bit outside Asheville. I have family that lives up in that area too. Now, here's the issue again with some of the rhetoric. Obviously, you see like Nick's like just said there will be no additional resources given by areas pummeled by the hurricane. I don't know. It sounds like that's what he said, but it also sounds like he said that there's no additional resources that they can be giving at this time. Not that there wouldn't be any in the future. But it's really it's interesting enough that they just approved another what 340 billion or something like that, or million to go to Ukraine, and we're not even spending, you know, we're sending all that money overseas when it could be going to help with disaster relief, help people, you know, get back into their houses, help people build their houses back up. You know, I just saw something before I came on air when I was literally about to come on air that was talking about Waffle Houses. Waffle Houses are making food and sending it up there for the people that are, you know, affected by the tragedies. And somebody said, you know, Waffle House is doing more than our federal government. And to be honest, like that's the way. Like voluntarism is always going to be the better solution than using the federal government for anything. This is the case to be made for all charitable services, voluntarism, which is why, like, when people that are affected by this have like GoFundMe accounts and stuff like that, I always try to support those efforts, especially when I know the person. But even still, like, I think that, you know, GoFundMe, you voluntarily support people who are affected by tragedy. And that's the way we have it. I do believe that our country is a charitable country that would help people out when they're affected by these things. You know, I don't, they don't, their priority. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jen, as well as they don't understand their priorities. Their priorities are our government is terrible at delegating. Yeah, I mean, they are. They don't. It's. I mean, it's one thing when you look at the spending discrepancies on things that they do. It's like 345 million here and a million over here to help the Maui wildfires, or, you know, hurricane disaster relief, as well. Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris have been to any of the areas affected, even the ones that are down in lower southern Georgia and Florida and those areas. But Donald Trump was there today. So now Donald Trump is down there with his own money, working to get Starlink set up. We have people in Asheville. Actually, I think Nick is actually in Asheville right now. Let me see. So Nick's, I believe, is in Asheville. reporting. And let me see. Yeah, so Nick Sorter's got a lot of he's got a lot of the stuff on the ground in there, and says so right now in West North Carolina, the cell signal is still practically non-existent. Our Asheville Starlink hubs are handling hundreds of people to connect them, and they're buying 10 more. And now Donald Trump said he's working with Elon Musk to get more Starlink set up down in Valdosta, Georgia, where he was at today to see some of the recovery effort down there. And again, that's southern Georgia, so that was impacted pretty hard from the hurricane as well. And so you're having a lot of stuff just continuously like happening, and it's interesting because you see people making so many different excuses that people are making for the administration. Like Biden nor Harris have gone to the affected areas, which you would expect that the president would go and, oversee and see what's going on with those FEMA operations that we're just sending money to go help all that stuff and make sure that things are actually happening. But then the left will say, well, he doesn't want to go down there and get in the way. The last thing that those people need is a presidential motorcade going through the area and disrupting all the operations and everything. But no, it's a morale boost, right? Anytime you see the president of the country coming down to in a disaster area to see what's going on, to make sure that things are going and to meet with the people that are there that are affected by the tragedy. It's one thing to see it on TV. It's one thing to see it from a helicopter. I mean, he didn't even do that. He could have flown a helicopter over the area to see the extent of the damage. That's probably what they should do, but they haven't. They really need to do stuff like that. But if you fly over with a helicopter, see the extent of the damage, then land, meet some of the people, see it firsthand. You don't get an appreciation for what actually happened unless you see it firsthand, meet with the people on ground that are affected by it, and then also, just kind of show the people that you care about them and that you haven't forgotten about them by coming to visit them. I mean, we see this even when we were in the military, like generals and stuff like that come out to see their soldiers when they're in the field in the military. Why? Because it shows that they care about the people that are there, like the people that are serving under them. They care about them, so they go. Yeah, when Jen says when we say America first, this is what we mean. Exactly. Our priorities need to be here, not overseas. And when a disaster hits the United States, this should be our focus. And yet it's not. And I don't have it in here either, but now Israel has launched a ground offensive into Lebanon, which who knows how far that's going to escalate to? How much more involvement is the U.S. going to have in Israel waging war against another country? Things are getting crazy, and on multiple levels, multiple fronts. At the same time, I have this update from the first assassination attempt from President Trump, where it has been revealed that the Secret Service was informed of the shooter 27 minutes before the shots were fired. So there was this whole, if you remember going back, there was a whole thing where they were like, the local police knew, but the Secret Service never knew. And there was a lot of this, like back and forth on this. There was a lot of confusion early on. But now we know that not only was Secret Service aware, the snipers were also aware, and they never took Trump off stage. And this is what has been my my issue from the very beginning, and what makes this completely suspect, is that they never took down Trump off that stage. So there's a timeline on here. So it says approximately 5:45 p.m. Secret Service personnel were notified that law enforcement observed a suspicious person with a rangefinder near the building. By 5:52, at least 8 Secret Service personnel had been informed. 8 people had been informed, and yet they still let Donald Trump go on that stage. Or this was approximately 2 minutes before the shots were fired, and he was still allowed to be speaking 2 minutes later. Now, you don't, if you find something suspicious, your job is to pull the, your pull Trump off the stage and clear the area and then figure out what that suspicious thing in person was, so that this doesn't happen. So they did 12 key points of complete and total failure, where the Secret Service should have taken action to protect the president and take out the shooter, and completely failed to do so, nearly costing him his life, basically. And it did cost the life of Corey Comparatore. Said 1, Secret Service personnel were notified of a suspicious person with a rangefinder around the building around approximately 27 minutes before the shooting. Secret Service was notified about an individual on the roof approximately 2 minutes before he fired the shot. So he had 2 minutes to get Trump out of there, or take him out. You have snipers on the roof. Take him out. We saw the video of him moving along the roof. Shortly before shots were fired, a counter sniper saw local law enforcement running toward the building with their guns drawn, but he did not alert the former president's protective detail to remove him from the stage. The counter sniper told the committee that while seeing officers with their guns drawn elevated the threat level, the thought to notify somebody to get Trump off stage did not cross my mind. So he's incompetent. How do you not, like, if it elevates the threat level, how does that not, like, cross your mind to let the protective detail know that something's going on and get him off the stage? Counter snipers, including the one who shot and killed the shooter, were sent to the rally in response to credible intelligence of threat. However, the Secret Service personnel interviewed by the committee nearly all said they were unaware of credible intelligence threat. So we didn't report about this, but it's been reported on other shows and everything like that. There was a credible threat by Iran to assassinate President Trump, and so the Secret Service, and actually President Biden, allowed more people to, like, allowed an increase in security detail for Trump over what it was. So this was actually the increased security detail that still messed this up. Secret Service agents for the July 13th rally denied individual responsibility for planning or security failures, defected blame, and could not identify who had final decision authority for the rally. So all the individual agents didn't know. They're just going to say, it's not me. So who was in charge? Who was in charge? The Secret Service would have security, would have the decision authority. They should be the ones with that. Whoever, and it should be Trump's security detail head, like the person that's the closest to the president or the former president, should be that person that has overall authority, or whoever runs that detail. Local law enforcement raised concerns about the security at that building. Secret Service personnel identified multiple line of sight concerns at the Butler Farm Show grounds, including the building. So they already knew that was somewhere that they should have been monitoring with their counter sniper teams. There were two separate communication centers at the July 13th rally, one run by the U.S. Secret Service and one by local law enforcement. The shooter was in the counter sniper sights for mere seconds before he fired at the shooter. U.S. Secret Service advanced agents requested additional resources that thought it would have been helpful, but those assets were denied. They were denied. So the Secret Service actually did something right there, and they said, hey, we could use some more assets. They were denied. So UAS system, so their CUAS system experienced technical problems and was inoperable. I believe the CAUS system would be the counter drone system, so that this was inoperable after 4:33 after Crooks flew his drone near the rally site. Several Secret Service officials reported experiencing technical problems with the radio at the rally and told the committee such problems are common for the Secret Service. And they said the committee finds that the Secret Service failure in planning, communication security, and allocation of resources for the rally were foreseeable, preventable, and directly related to the events resulting in the assassination attempt that day. What's going to happen? Who's going to get fired? Who is going to be held accountable for this? I mean, just hearing some of this stuff, it almost looks like, you ever seen the movie Shooter with Mark Wahlberg, where they kind of set him up, where it was the government setting him up he was out there reconning potential sniper spots and trying to stop something from happening. A lot of this sounds like that. They knew exactly where the probable sniper locations would be and identified those locations, and the crooks just happened to use one of them. Look, I'm not suggesting anything, but I am. I think we talked about it on the show. I don't a lot of this doesn't make sense. And I'm not trusting what the official narrative was at this point in time. So, yeah. Let's see. What's next? Oh, this is kind of actually an update to a story that we talked about last year too. So, breaking. Well, this was the other day. New York City Mayor Eric Adams indicted on federal criminal charges. So if you remember, we talked about this last year when Eric Adams started talking. It seemed like he was a darling of the left, in good graces with the president and the vice president and everything like that. And then he started speaking out against how unsustainable the flow of illegal immigrants into the country was, especially for sanctuary cities like New York City. He just said it's not sustainable, and the federal government is denying to do anything about it. They were denying any money or aid, and he said it's gonna bankrupt cities like New York, and basically New York citizens were dealing. They're the ones that are dealing, because Eric Adams had to cut costs to try to pay for the housing for these people that are here and draining the system. So some of those costs were like police funding and everything like that, and he was calling it out. He was saying it didn't work, and then after he started speaking out, they raided his office. Now they're investigating him for, I believe, let me see, we'll pull it up. Okay, so New York Post reported details about the exact accusations remain unclear, but are believed to be connected to an alleged kickback scheme involving the Turkish government illegally funneling money into his mayoral campaign. So basically, illegal campaign funding, accepting illegal campaign contributions, especially to a foreign donor and a foreign government. Sources familiar with the matter said that Adams is being charged with acting as an unregistered foreign agent for taking actions in his official capacity after receiving donations from foreign sources. And so, like I said, we've talked about this. This was this is what I said in response to this, shot chaser, right? December 18th of 2023, Eric Adams admits Biden admin will not help New York City with illegal immigrant crisis. See, I wrote that one. This is my article. And then just the other day, just literally September 25th, Mayor indicted on federal crime charges. And it really does seem like, when you stand up, if you are against the administration, they will come after you. And especially in New York City. Remember, I mean, we've been talking about lawfare for quite a while when it comes to Trump. But they will use the Justice Department to go after all of their political opponents. And even if you are a Democrat and you speak out against, this administration, they will come after you with the Justice Department. And I do believe, I mean, there's no proof that that's what happened here, but I do believe that this is just another case of the Justice Department going after people who speak out against them. I believe at this time, and I'm not the only one who believes it. Eric Adams believes it too. So this is what he said.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. But they would not be surprising. I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target. And a target I became. For months, leaks and rumors have been aimed at me in an attempt to undermine my credibility and paint me as guilty. Just this past week, they searched the home of our new police commissioner, looking for documents from 20 years ago, just 1 week after he joined my administration. Enough. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. My fellow New Yorkers.
I mean, like I said, in reality, this doesn't sound much different than what's going on with Donald Trump right now. What we've seen happen in New York with their justice system there. If you speak out against this administration, you are attacked, whether you're a Democrat or not. So yeah. Which, I mean, kind of brings you up to the case of InfoWars, right? So y'all know what happened with InfoWars. So Alex Jones was forced by a judge last year to pay $1.5 billion or something like that to the families of the Sandy Hook shooting. At the time, Alex had gone on the air and said it was a hoax, said that the parents were crisis actors because like one of the dads was laughing just before turning on the waterworks for the camera. Like these are the types of things that he was bringing up. Now, Alex he was on Blair White's show the one time talking about what he was going through at the time of this. He wasn't in a good place. He was drinking a lot. Like there was a lot of personal stuff that was going on. And he has since apologized for this, though he wasn't going to go to the point where he should have been charged. And that's where he fought that in court. Right. So he fought in court. He lost in court. And then they ordered him to pay like $1.5 billion. And this week, a judge, since he's been kind of like, you're not going to get any of this money, like, not even worth that amount of money. Like, that was the whole thing in court. Like, they were trying to charge him for this much money when he's like, I'm not even worth that much. I don't have that much, even assets to be able to sell that much. But the judge said, InfoWars, the TV studio, would be liquidated in auction in November, and that he will approve the auctions. So basically, they're going to shut down InfoWars. Now they're going to shut down InfoWars, but you can't shut down Alex Jones, right? That's the whole thing. Is Alex Jones can, like, once you shut down InfoWars, he can start his own platform, or he can go work for somebody else. I don't know if somebody else would take him on, but he can start a YouTube channel. Well, he probably couldn't start a YouTube channel. He could start a Rumble channel. He could go on and do his own thing. And so Clint Russell from Liberty Lock Pod makes a really good point here. He says if they were interested in compensating the Sandy Hook families, they would have let Alex stay on InfoWars and pay a percentage of the annual, like have InfoWars pay a percentage of the annual revenue. By liquidating everything, they kill the golden goose. Needless to say, they are doing this because it was never about Sandy Hook. It was always about silencing Alex. And he makes a really good point. If this is really about getting the money for the family, then you don't take away the income of the person who's supposed to be paying them. Like, literally, they silence Alex Jones. He's no longer able to pay anything. So what he has is what he can give. And so instead of like, what is it? I mean, it would be like the business equivalent to stipending somebody's wages. That's not stipending. Does it start with a G? Garnishing somebody's wages. So they could literally be like, hey, you're going to do this. Now, again, like, I don't know all the details of the settlement, and it really could be that InfoWars, the reason why it has to be InfoWars is because it's the platform that all this stuff was set on. But it's an LLC. So Alex is not financially liable. I don't know how that works. I don't know how the judgment is set up, because it would seem like it would be Alex Jones, not InfoWars, who would be forced to liquidate. But I think that they combined the two, and they said that InfoWars was because it was solely owned by Alex Jones. I don't know. There's a whole reason why, like, you do a limited liability corporation in these types of situations, so that way if something happens in your business end, your personal end is not affected. Like, you're protected, your personal is protected. But there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to, especially like content creators and running stuff through LLCs. And I mean, Alex Jones, the person, is who said it. It's not necessarily indicative of InfoWars, the company, but it was said on InfoWars airs. And if that's the case, what's said on, different platforms is the responsibility. Again, this is where you get into like Section 230 protections for publishers versus platforms. InfoWars would be considered a publisher, I guess, whereas like Twitter is a platform, even though they are kind of the same thing. Section 230 has got a lot of like ambiguity in that regard as well. And so I don't know how this would translate into something like Twitter. Can Twitter be held liable for something that anybody says? I think they would be able to hold like Elon Musk liable if Elon Musk says something, but it's not like if Sara Higdon says something, it's a platform, a free speech platform, that Twitter can't be held liable for something I say on the platform. But if I was working say if I say something over at the Post Millennial, and if we had a YouTube channel or something like that, the Post Millennial, they could be held liable for something that I said on that YouTube channel. It's all a little confusing. I don't know how they determined that InfoWars could be held liable when it was Alex Jones that said it. But again, like, they're not going to be able to silence Alex Jones. Alex Jones is still going to have a platform. So they just kind of killed that if they're going after InfoWars, rather than allowing him to continue to make a profit and then just taking some of that profit every year for those families. And like Clint says, it was never about the families. It's only about silencing Alex Jones. So let's see what else. Let's do this one first. Okay. Speaking of silencing people, so you're talking about a lot of this stuff. We get into some of this free speech stuff, and I'll tell you, when they, and it's a good sense to say, when they tell you what they mean, believe them. Like when they tell you what they're about, believe them. So John Kerry, in this speech to the WEF, the World Economic Forum, of course we know that's the globalist organization that is based off of, you know, communist standards, and they don't appreciate the liberty values and the American way of life. But neither does John Kerry with this statement, basically saying that he says unfortunately we had the First Amendment, because then that blocks people, that blocks their ability to censor the American people. Here's what he said.
Dislike of and anguish over social media is just growing and growing and growing. And it's part of our problem, particularly in democracies, in terms of building consensus around any issue. It's really hard to govern today. You can't, there's no, the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. And people go, and then people self-select where they go for their news or for their information. And then you just get into a vicious cycle. So it's really, really hard, much harder to build consensus today than at any time in the 45, 50 years I've been involved in this. And there's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick and, has an agenda and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence. So what we need is to win the ground, win the right to govern by hopefully having, winning enough votes that you're free to be able to implement change. Now, obviously, there are some people in our country who are prepared to implement change in other ways. And
so
that's
you're
really
questioning
dangerous.
really if democracy can survive unregulated social media.
I think democracies are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to deal with the challenges that we are facing. And to me, that is part of what this race, this election is all about. Will we break the fever in the United States?
Think about what he just said there. That is a very revealing statement, right? What he just, so you could say, I mean, first, when you break it down into different parts, he says the First Amendment is a major block to being able to hammer basically misinformation out of existence. He's basically saying the First Amendment prevents us from being able to censor and silence and censor people, which we want to do. It really makes you question narratives of the past before we had the internet. He said it's harder for us to gain a consensus than it ever has been. And you look and you think about history, and you look and see what's going on here, and you see how much we're being lied to every day, how many community notes there are out there on different issues, and you start to see the propaganda that is happening, and you say, and you realize, and the mainstream media is some of the biggest perpetuators of propaganda. And so you look at this and you say, well, in the past, we just had a consensus, and a lot of this was just top down given by the government. It may not be state run media, but it's state run, it's state coordinated media. And so they put out all the information that they wanted, and the mainstream media would run with it. How brainwashed were we through history? And I talked, if you saw last week, on Thursday, I talked to my good friend Logan Albright about his book, which is right there, Freedom Over Fear. Go pick it up at freethepeople.org, shop.freethepeople.org. But I talked about this on the Blair White show too. There's a saying that history is always written by the winners, and the bad guys have never won in history. And then it makes you think, like, now that we don't have this consensus about what history looks like, which is what he's saying, how much of history that we learned about from history is real and how much is fake? How much of it was just a consensus as to what they wanted to push for history being? It's really scary to think about. And what's even more scary, and so you break this down into separate parts, and you see that he says the best thing to do would be to win the election, so that way you have the freedom to govern, which really just means we have to win this election so that we have the power to silence who we want, so that we can shape the narrative. We have, like, they as globalists have to shape the narrative and have to have control of the institutions. They have to have that control so that that way they can spread the propaganda that they want and try to stamp out what they consider misinformation. Doesn't mean it's actual misinformation. But they are controlling the narrative. They are controlling what is misinformation, what isn't misinformation. I mean, look back. I mean, you don't have to look back much further than the COVID-19 pandemic, where so many people were silenced and kicked off social media platforms for saying stuff which ended up being true just months and years later. There were so many people that were out there saying this stuff, what is true, what's not true. And the government told us that this was misinformation. We know from the Twitter files that they silenced people for saying that stuff. And then it comes out that a lot of that stuff turned out to be true. And Jen McMahon says that's Orwellian. And that's really what it is. John Kerry basically sounds like he wants to establish a ministry of truth, which, remember, they did actually try that before. They did try to create a COVID misinformation board, which is essentially just a ministry of truth. And you won't, it's their history, not our history. It's like, we've always been at war with Eurasia type stuff. And if you've read Orwell, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm pretty sure most people in this audience at least know quite a bit about what Orwell talked about. So that's really what he's asking for. He's asking for a ministry of truth. And then when they say democracies are having a hard time right now, no. Democracies are being democracies. We live in a constitutional republic. Just remember this. We don't live in a democracy in the United States. We live in a constitutional republic. There's a big difference, and I can explain the difference if you really wanted to. but they're having a hard time because the population is getting wise. The population is actually thinking on their own and not just listening to what y'all say. We're actually doing our own research. And again, one thing that came out from the COVID-19 pandemic is, do your own research. Do your own research on everything. Not just, I try to come on here and talk about, I talk about, what people are saying on the left and right, and try to give straight facts. Try to just give the truth, give my opinion along with it. Obviously, most of this is just an opinion show. But you have to go and you have to find both sides of the issue. You have to figure it out. You can't just, if you, and it's really bad because so many of us are perpetually online. But there is a lot of the population that just listens to mainstream media, which is what's really crazy. Why, a lot of the population just listens to mainstream and local media, which are just regurgitating the same talking points that the federal government wants them to regurgitate. They're not really pushing back on the narratives that are being pushed out there. So getting on social media and finding other perspectives is kind of key to, really making a determination for yourself what is true and what's false. They don't like it because they're being called out. Look at what's going on with the Harris, the Kamala HQ account on Twitter is constantly spreading misinformation. It's constantly telling lies that they want you to believe. Project 2025, that's a complete, they're trying to tie it to Trump, but it's not a Trump policy. We've talked about that before on the show. It's not a Trump policy, and they will continuously say it over and over and over and over. If you say something enough, you start to believe it. People start to believe it. But it's a lie after lie after lie after lie. It's a full court press. Now, if we didn't have social media where people would be like, hey, that's a lie. What are you talking about? No. That's not Trump's policy. And if you didn't have a media itself that's not pushing back on that, that would be, that would be the narrative, and everybody would begin to believe that that's the truth. But they can't silence that. They can't silence us calling them liars because they are. And they can't stand that. They can't stand that they don't have that control. And that's exactly what he's talking about. We need to win. Now, he's not going to be able to get rid of the First Amendment. There's no way there. There's no way. You have to ratify the Constitution to make changes to stifle out, hammer out of existence the other information that you find to be inconvenient, like this one. So next story is actually Kamala Harris visits the border. Remember, they said Kamala Harris was named as the border czar back in 2021 when they came into office. Biden named her as the border czar. Axios reported it. And then just this year, they said she was never named the border czar. What are you talking about? That's misinformation. They would have silenced you for that misinformation if it wasn't for Twitter, basically. But even this, she goes to the border. Having been named the border czar, she goes to the border only while she's running for president. Imagine that. The Border Patrol Union, which has, I believe, I'm pretty sure they've endorsed President Trump. It'll be at the bottom of this article. Asked, where has she been in the last 3.5 years? They've been in office for 3.5 years, and this is the first time that she's gone boots on ground to see the border. They called it a photo op. Vice President Harris has ignored the border problems she created for over 3 years. She goes down there for 20 minutes for a photo op and decides to repeat some of the things that the border control has said before. But again, where has she been the last 3.5 years? I want to make sure. Fact check from the Border Patrol Union. on Harris's speech in Arizona. Today, the Vice President Harris claimed that she played a role in increasing Border Patrol agents' overtime pay. This couldn't be further from the truth. As with all things border-related, she was nowhere to be found when we needed her. Now, again, I will say this one thing. Just remember, I said this last week. I said this last week that I think it was last week. I don't really get the need for public sector unions. I think it's kind of a oxymoron. Border Patrol doesn't need a union, but here we are. Yeah, there's no need for a Border Patrol union, and I don't even know why they would why a public sector union would be endorsing people. But again, here we are. I don't agree with it, but we're reporting the news. And it's interesting because they keep talking about, the Border Patrol keeps talking about, or they keep talking about the border. And now the newest thing from the Harris campaign is that Donald Trump had the bill killed that would have the bipartisan border bill. But again, remember, so they're like, oh, Trump, the bill would have actually done something, a bipartisan border bill, and Trump had it killed, and so we could have actually been doing stuff, but he didn't want to do anything because he wanted to use this as a campaign tactic. No, that border bill was garbage. What people need to keep pushing down there is that border bill allowed 4,000 people into this country a day. That's 1.5 million people over the course of a year. Donald Trump did not even have 1.5 million people a year coming into this country. It was only until 2022 that it actually hit 1.5 billion, which was a record at the time, a record amount of people coming into the country illegally at that time. But that bill would have allowed a record number of people coming into this country. And sure, the numbers are all down this year. The numbers are down this year from last year and the year before, I think just from last year. But when you have 3 record years in a row, and those records are not just like close to even Trump years, those records are way higher than even Trump years, then you're having issues. Okay. And yeah. And at the same time, our administration is opposing a ban on the Communist Party buying land in the United States. What they're doing is they're buying a lot of this farmland, most of it by our military bases, and that's sketchy in and of itself. But what I've kind of heard too, and I don't know if it's in this article, I've heard what they're doing with this farmland is they're purchasing the farmland, and then they're stripping the topsoil, which is where plants like to grow. Like that's what you need for plants to grow. They're stripping the topsoil and then shipping it to China so that they can start growing their own stuff in China. So they're depleting our resources that way as well. And we're just, the administration opposes allowing a foreign country to basically buy our country. Think about this. A foreign country is coming in. If you want to talk about how to win a war from the inside or invade a country from the inside, you go and you buy their land. You buy land, you buy more, you buy more, you buy more. Pretty soon you have more land in this country than the country itself even has. And then what do? That is insane to me. And lastly, Jen McMahon says, do you know what scares me? First-time voters who are only voting because of Taylor Swift and they know nothing about Dick Cheney. Technically, Cheney is a white dude for Harris. Yes. And I don't know how many people, and actually there was a poll that came out recently that actually showed that more people are not voting for Harris because Taylor Swift endorsed her than are actually changing their vote to Harris for Swift. And I don't think most people look at their favorite celebrities and who they're voting for, and they're going to vote for them. Because it really does. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Maybe I'm being a little optimistic here, but I don't think a lot of people are doing that. But you're right, though. A lot of people are. I mean, we talked about it before in here. The Democrats are embracing Dick Cheney, which is it's scary but hilarious at the same time, because it's like, do you guys not remember the early 90s? Like, and I have this pulled up and I want to share it because this was exactly the point of Tulsi Gabbard's speech at the Rescue the Republic rally in DC this weekend. And it says a vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, a vote for Halliburton. And so this kind of says everything that is reacting to what you're talking about, Jen, because you're absolutely right. Oh no, 1 second. I have to. My you guys know how this works. Sometimes it's weird. It comes out like this. Where is it? There it is.
In 2005. I was serving in the state legislature at the time. I stepped down from that seat and volunteered to deploy in a medical unit, where I was confronted with the high human cost of war. It was the first time in my life that I had experienced and seen firsthand the war profiteering that goes on. For those of you who served in Iraq at that time, and I hear it's still going on in Europe today, KBR Halliburton remains one of the biggest defense contractors profiting off of war.
So why would Cheney endorse Harris?
Halliburton logos on our porta potties, on our tents, and on our trash cans. A friend of mine who was deployed to Poland recently said, nothing has changed. Now, who was one of the people that profited off of this? Dick Cheney. Where is Dick Cheney today? Dick Cheney is standing proudly with Kamala Harris, who has said that she is proud and honored to have his endorsement and his support. Now, for the young ones who may not remember, Dick Cheney was the architect of the entire disaster that has been created with all of the problems that we're seeing play out in the Middle East today and other parts of the world. He was the architect of the lie about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He was the architect behind the regime change war and the destabilization in Iraq that caused such chaos and loss of life and destruction that created the fertile ground for the rise of ISIS. That is the Dick Cheney who Kamala Harris is honored to have his support. So for those of you who may be at home watching, or for those of you who have friends who are still not quite sure who to vote for in this election, I'll make it very simple. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for the neocon warmongers. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for the military-industrial complex. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. It's amazing to see the Democrats, who were once so vocally anti-war, become the party of war, the pro-war party. The party that once called Dick Cheney and George Bush literal Nazis are now the party of Dick Cheney. That's all you really need to know about them. So, again, thank you all for joining this week. If you didn't watch, like I said, go watch my interview with Logan that we did on Thursday. Probably start bringing back some more people, doing more interviews and doing some more content throughout the week, other than just the Monday night show. But that remains to be seen. It will probably be intermittent here and there. So keep an eye on this channel. Check in with the community tab that we have over here. But the best way to do that too is to also follow me across all social media platforms. But again, go to shop.freethepeople.org. You can check out Logan Albright's book, Freedom Over Fear. And as always, if you haven't already, click that like and subscribe button below. Follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.